So it's been a few weeks since the last episode of Ghostly News. The main reason for that is because I've been bogged down working on an episode of The Big Slice, which is all about unions in video games. Unfortunately, that involved a lot more research and a lot more thought and a lot more discussion with people working in the video games industry, both present and historically, than I actually expected. Now, that video is currently in production and it will be out soon, so do look forward to it. For now though, let's catch up with some of the things that have been happening more recently. Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Ghostly News, the show where I wade through the humdrum morass of video game news and pick out some of the choicer cuts for your listening pleasure. And today, we're kicking things off with something that on the surface seems quite dry and humdrum, but when you dig a little deeper, it becomes a lot more interesting. Regular listeners will know about a company that I've referenced before called Ampere Analysis. They are a data and analytics firm specializing in the media sector, and they do a lot of research that covers in-depth financials, KPI analysis, company performance, that sort of thing. So, you have an idea of what they do. They've recently published a study that suggests that the video games market is going to decline year on year in 2022. Now that might seem confusing at first because on the surface it does seem like the video games industry is doing rather well. But according to research director and longtime video games market analyst Piers Harding-Rolls, after 2 years of huge expansion, the games market is poised to hand back a bit of that growth in 2022 as multiple factors combine to undermine performance. He goes on to say, even so, the year will end well ahead of pre-pandemic performance, and the outlook for the sector as a whole remains positive, with growth forecast to return in 2023. Now, you've got to remember something about how things were during the last couple of years. We had a global pandemic, COVID-19 hit every country, people were in lockdown, they had more time at home, so they needed things to do at home. Hence, the video games market achieved a level of growth that it just couldn't sustain. In addition to that, you had cryptocurrency miners buying up all of the graphics cards that they could get their hands on, scalpers buying up the rest and overinflating the prices of them. You had supply chain shortages all over the world. There were no microprocessors or transistors available for making new consoles, and yet the PS5 and the Series X both got released during the pandemic. Add to that the closure of internet cafes across Asia and the closure of businesses and semi-public spaces where people could gather and play video games together. Then add to that the withdrawal of all of the Western video game companies from Russia because of their invasion of Ukraine, and you have this really weird situation that the video games industry finds itself in, along with quite a few other industries. Now, this study by Ampere Analysis will probably appeal to people like me who are more interested in the business side of the video games industry and how it connects with other industries, because, like it or not, game sales are not immune to macroeconomic turbulence. Now, one of the things that affects the sales of video games is obviously the availability of video games, and that's where Ubisoft find themselves in people's bad books, because Ubisoft announced not too long ago that they were shutting down multiplayer for a number of older games and even access to some DLC. Now, this was mainly on PC. Bizarrely, it didn't affect certain console titles. They were also closing down certain multiplayer-only titles on PC as well, things like Space Junkies. Now, one could obviously argue that for titles like Assassin's Creed 2, nobody's really going to be playing the multiplayer on that, especially not when other, better multiplayer options are available now. So yeah, you could divert the resources meant to maintain that onto something else. That could be an argument. But what people don't understand, and what came to light, were certain games, single-player games like Assassin's Creed Liberation and Silent Hunter 5. Yes, they may have DLC that you no longer have access to, and yes, there may be multiplayer that you no longer have access to, but for some reason, the games themselves were delisted from Steam. Now, obviously, to the people who noticed this, it was more than a little bit odd, and even though Ubisoft have said that the decommissioned games will remain available to the current owners, when single-player games start getting delisted as well, you've got to think, well, something's gone wrong with your plan. Either you didn't plan it correctly or you didn't present it correctly. Something has gone horribly wrong. Now, there are suggestions that the situation on Steam is a digital nightmare for Ubisoft. I don't think it's a nightmare yet, and I do think Ubisoft will do their damnedest to try and recover from this little spat. I wouldn't say it's a major issue at the moment. It does only involve a couple of games as far as we know. Ubisoft themselves have clarified that current owners of all decommissioned games will still be able to access, play, or re-download them. This would include Assassin's Creed Liberation. The company have said that only DLC and online features will be affected and that it's working to update this information across all storefronts. The problem is, they haven't actually said why these single-player games were being delisted from Steam in the first place. They also haven't clarified why it seems to be primarily PC and not console, but that's not all. According to a recent episode of The One Show with Linus and the rest of his gang, it seems that certain launchers are not affected as well. It mainly seems to be Steam or whatever Ubisoft's launcher is that are going to be affected by these changes, which again seems bizarre. Now, this whole thing has brought into light and into heavy focus the question of digital rights ownership. Again, who owns the games that you buy? Is it the company or is it you? We're going to leave that to one side because that is a whole other discussion which I'm not going to get into. Instead, we're going to talk about Microsoft and the streaming of games. Because recently, Samsung and Microsoft announced a new app for Samsung TVs by which you can basically stream Xbox games. It's called the Samsung Gaming Hub, and the tagline is, no storage limits, no downloads, just bring your controller. Now, this was part of the sizzle reel for the Samsung Gaming Hub at its launch event on Monday this week. They had all sorts of footage from all sorts of games as well, and the interesting thing about the hub is that it's not just dedicated to Game Pass. Samsung's new 2022 Smart TV does offer you access to Game Pass, but it also offers you access to Nvidia's GeForce Now, Google's Stadia, Amazon's Luna, and even PC subscription services like Utomic. And it enables you to stream games directly to the TV via the cloud. Now, GamesIndustry.biz have put together an interesting article from the launch event for Samsung's Gaming Hub. The article is called Xbox. Cloud gaming is a great alternative to console but not a replacement. Samsung and Microsoft tell us how game streaming reached the needed inflection point as they partner on the Samsung Gaming Hub. Now, Games Industry managed to get hold of people like Gus Grimaldi, who is Samsung's head of product for Europe, and Pav Bhardwaj, the senior global product manager at Xbox Game Pass. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. They had all sorts of interesting things to say about cloud gaming, about streaming games from the cloud, about the history and the future of that particular service. But one key point did stand out, and that was the idea that this will not replace consoles or PC gaming. The article is worth a read if you are interested in the future of cloud gaming and the future of game streaming, or even if you're just interested in the technological side of the video game space, how things are developing and changing behind the scenes. I'll link it in the description below, so if you want to have a read of it, you can. Now, we know that Microsoft is already working on a Fire Stick-esque, dongle-esque type thing that you plug into a TV that doesn't have this Samsung Gaming Hub app on. And we know that that dongle will offer you Game Pass streaming to that TV. But when you're talking about things like the growth or the shrinkage of the video games industry, this is one of those areas where there's going to be a fundamental shift in ways that we might not be able to predict, because video games don't work the same way as movies and TV. And yes, we might be able to get some idea of how things might change from how things have changed within those industries. But that's not going to be a hard and fast rule, because there are other factors within the video games industry. The move to mobile, for example, that is becoming more and more of a thing. More and more companies are looking at mobile gaming, the rise of virtual reality and the metaverse. That again is a thing that is affecting video games. There's also the whole issue of NFTs. because the first NFT games console has been announced. It's called the Polium 1, and obviously its reveal has been met with some criticism. Polium like to class themselves as a Web3 company, and they claim that Polium 1 will be the world's first multi-chain gaming console and that it will be capable of running games built on different blockchains. According to Polium, the console will be powerful enough to run high-performance games and will be easy to use for a traditional gamer who doesn't understand Web3. Now here's where some of the controversy is. Apparently, the console is only going to be available from Q3 2024 to people who pre-ordered it by buying a Polium Pass, which is an NFT on the Ethereum network, of which only 10,000 will be available. According to Polium themselves, the console's controller will include a fingerprint scanner for security and a wallet button to give players quick access to the console's multi-chain wallet designed for trading, swapping, staking and receiving cryptocurrency. And this is where a lot of the rest of the controversy comes from, because despite Polium making all sorts of wild claims about 8K HDR and 120 FPS and ray tracing, there's only 4 people working on the hardware. Now, before everyone runs around saying, "See, I told you, it's a total scam," I'm going to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. We're going to take a bit of a left to a developer conference in Brazil, where a speaker was applauded enthusiastically for turning a talk on the future of gaming into a surprise attack on the convention's NFT and blockchain sponsors. Now, the person in question was a game developer called Mark Venturelli, who received a spirited ovation at Brazil's International Games Festival. This was last Friday. He switched his talk by surprise from the future of game design to why NFTs are a nightmare. Venturelli, who is best known for the game Chroma Squad, didn't just push back against those talks by calling NFTs a nightmare. He argued in detail that they're bad for gaming and run directly counter to his vision for the future of game design. Now, he did do a follow-up interview with PC Gamer in which he said, "These people are outsiders here, they're not important. They're just trying to buy their relevance because they have no actual influence over the future of our industry. If you just give them this space uncontested, you're just giving them exactly what they want and buying their narrative that they are relevant." A recording of Venturelli's presentation is available on YouTube and it's shared by himself. But this is the thing, right? You have people who are heavily resistant to video games and NFTs being together in any way, shape or form, but businesses want them. They don't actually give a shit about what you want, because at the end of the day, they are businesses, they are designed to make money. Which brings us back to the Polium 1, because regardless of whether it's a scam or not, one of the criticisms that was levelled at it was the usage of the Polium Pass. It seems at first that these people who are making the Polium and other decisions like that are outsiders to the video games industry. In Mark Venturelli's words, they're just trying to buy their relevance because they have no actual influence over the future of our industry. So here's a question. What about Dr. Disrespect? Because his development company, Midnight Society, are making a PvPvE shooter. Right now it's called Project Moon, and the idea is to create the next AAA competitive PvPvE first-person shooter, which, according to Midnight Society, is going to be developed openly and transparently, releasing snapshots every 6 weeks or so, which are vertical slices of the build of the game. Now, back in March, Dr. Disrespect and his company sold off 10,000 NFTs that represented founders' active passes that gave access to all sorts of things, including these vertical slices, game alphas, and all sorts of stuff like that. They were sold for $50 each, and according to Midnight Society, they had over 400,000 applicants for those NFTs. So there is a market for NFTs within video games, depending on who's presenting them. And it won't be long until we have a situation where for every Mark Venturelli who speaks out against NFTs, we'll have a Dr. Disrespect who wants to use NFTs to make money for their game. That time will come. Okay, let's leave NFTs to one side now. Time to talk about events, because E3 didn't happen, but Summer Games Fest did. And obviously, that's put the wind up the ESA's backside. It's been several years since E3 ran as a live event, and they've obviously thought long and hard about what they want to do with E3 now, so they've gone over to Reedpop, who are the owners and organisers of a number of events, including New York Comic Con, Star Wars Celebration, PAX, Eurogamer, EGX Rezzed, and a whole bunch of others. And they also own and operate a number of websites as well, gamesindustry.biz, Eurogamer itself, Rock Paper Shotgun, all sorts of stuff related to video games. Now, given all of the journalism sites that they've got attached to them, you could effectively say Reedpop have their finger on the video game's pulse. They know things that are going to happen, they have loads and loads of contacts, and they also know how to run events. Who better then to take over the running of E3 from the ESA, who will still own the event, they're just letting Reedpop run the event. So together, the ESA and Reedpop are going to offer up a new E3 in 2023 at the LA Convention Center, and the event is going to encompass both digital showcases and in-person components that will also be open to consumers. According to ESA President and CEO Stanley Pierre-Louis, we are thrilled to bring back E3 as an in-person event with Reedpop. The past 3 years have confirmed that E3 convenes our industry like no other event. Reedpop brings world-class talent and a keen understanding of the video game industry, which will serve to enhance the E3 experience for years to come. The president of Reedpop, Lance Fensterman, also made some comments about how they're looking forward to bringing E3 back in new and exciting ways based on their experience of the events that they've done. But even with all that experience, it still remains to be seen whether E3 can actually make a proper comeback, because it's not the biggest video games event in the world. That title belongs to Gamescom, and their lineup this year is ridiculous. They've confirmed over 500 companies are registered to attend Gamescom in Cologne, Germany in August. Now, we already know that Nintendo and PlayStation have announced that they won't be attending this year's Gamescom, but some of the companies that are making their debut there are the PUBG developer Krafton, Tencent's new publishing label Level Infinite, the developers and publishers of Genshin Impact are going there as HoYoverse, but they're actually MiHoYo, and the final company is Humble Games, who do the Humble Bundle. So it's nice to see that more and more in-game events are coming to the fore, but the elephant in the room is obviously that COVID is still a thing. We haven't fully recovered from the effects of the pandemic, and the virus is still around, we're just learning to live with it. Which is an interesting segue, because there's another event that is set to return in 2023, and the question about whether we can live with it is at the forefront of a lot of minds at the moment. Because, like it or not, BlizzCon is set to come back. And given all of the furore and the outrage and the accusations and allegations, the firings and everything else, all of the skeletons that came out of the closets, it would be fair if you were a little bit concerned about the return of BlizzCon. Blizzard haven't really covered themselves in glory, neither have Activision. Now, according to Blizzard President Mike Ibarra, we previously announced that we're taking a pause on BlizzCon while we reimagine it for the future, but do want to return to a live event that enables us to celebrate the community. We recently hired a new leader of BlizzCon, April McKee, who is hard at work on that plan. We are committed to bringing back BlizzCon in 2023. That seems to be a very positive story of change and growth and everything like that. Blizzard's turned a corner. Let's all be happy again. Let's all go play Blizzard games again. Well, let me just stop you right there for one brief second, because not too long ago I mentioned that Diablo Immortal made $24 million within its first couple of weeks. Now, Diablo Immortal's first month earnings are nearly $50 million. That is an obscene amount of money for a video game to make within its first month, and that's not from sales of the game, that is purely from microtransactions. Now, we know from the research that other people have kindly done that it will take over $110,000 for you to max out your character in Diablo Immortal. We know because Quinn69 proved it when he spent something like $25,000 to get the perfect gem and then quit the game as soon as he got it. He just wanted to prove that you could do it. We know a lot of things about Diablo Immortal and the horrible, ridiculous, greedy, and downright evil monetization practices that the game has. Then you have Mike Ibarra. Yep, you remember Mike Ibarra, president of Blizzard, who's hired April McKee to run BlizzCon. And everything's all sweetness and light because you can go and play Blizzard games again, because you can go to BlizzCon. Well, that same Mike Ibarra has defended Diablo Immortal's microtransactions, and Blizzard have also claimed that the vast majority of players aren't spending any money, which is bullshit. Now, according to Mike Ibarra, when we think about monetization, at the very highest level, it was how do we give a free Diablo experience to hundreds of millions of people where they can literally do 99.5% of everything in the game. He goes on to say, the monetization comes in at the end game. The philosophy was always to lead with great gameplay and make sure that hundreds of millions of people can go through the whole campaign without any costs. From that standpoint, I feel really good about it as an introduction to Diablo. Well, frankly, Mike, you make me sick. One of the ways he's defending this, and one of the reasons why he thinks this way, is obviously business spin. The other reason is because of the scores. Now, he's basically ignored the Metacritic scores, saying that people are basically bombing the game. What he's looking at are mobile scores. On the App Store, it's rated 4.5 out of 5. On Google Play Store, it's rated 3.7 out of 5. But what he's not telling you is that reviews on the App Store and on Google Play Store are different to a Metacritic review, where somebody has played the game and written a review after playing it extensively for a period of time. Reviews on mobile devices, the App Store and Google Play Store in particular, generally happen after someone's played the game for a short time and enjoyed it for a short time. And because the game is designed so that you don't pay anything until the end game, you've already written your review by the time you get to the end game to find out just how horrible the monetization practices are. Now, some of the things that Mike Ibarra has said about the monetization practices actually came out during an interview he did with the LA Times, which I will link in the description below. According to that article, he does want to have fun with games, but first his company is in crisis. Well, my message to you, Mike Ibarra, is don't make the crisis worse. Just try and keep things on an even keel. Don't mess up too badly, because Microsoft are coming to buy your asses out of the fire, provided they can get past the UK's competition watchdog, because they're investigating the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, the Competition and Markets Authority here in the UK works to promote competition for the benefit of consumers, and they announced that they were opening an investigation into the purchase of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. In a statement that they provided to CNBC, the CMA said that they would consider whether Microsoft's Activision takeover may harm competition through higher prices or reduced choice. And this is at a time when antitrust enforcers around the world are also lining up to review the purchase. The last two stories are basically one story because they both involve Nacon and they both are throwbacks to the 80s, which proves once and for all that most of the people who work in AAA development in modern video games don't really have any new ideas. I'm joking. See, I'm laughing. I must be joking. Anyway, Nacon Studio Milan have released a trailer for a new Terminator game, which is going to be a survival game set in the world before John Connor's Resistance comes into being, but after Judgment Day. And for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to with that timeline, go and watch Terminator and Terminator 2. According to Nacon Studio Milan, just a tease for the future, but if you couldn't tell, we're big fans of the 80s movies, and our team is working on the first survival game set in the Terminator universe. We can't say much more for now, but this is definitely something to keep your eyes on. I will be keeping my eyes on it because I want to see a good Terminator game. I really need one right about now. Speaking of which, there was a comic during the 90s, which is why I'm going to segue with this. It was called Robocop vs. Terminator, and it was a hell of a comic. If I remember rightly, Frank Miller wrote it, didn't draw it, but that Frank Miller of The Dark Knight and Sin City fame did tell a good story with it. Had some amazing imagery in it, and it was Robocop vs. Terminator. What more could you want? You could want a Robocop game, and that's exactly what Nacon are giving us. A Robocop game. Not based on the remake movie even, because this one has Peter Weller voicing his character. And it looks fantastic. The trailer, I was just like, yes, this is Detroit in the Robocop universe. This is what we expected. There are some little Easter eggs in there, like one of the characters saying, "Can you fly?" People who've watched the original Robocop movie will know that Bobby couldn't fly. Anyway, Robocop Rogue City is set to be released in 2023, and I just got goosebumps when Robocop steps out of the car and you hear Peter Weller's voice saying, "Dead or alive, you're coming with me." I was like, yes, this is my Robocop. This is the Robocop that I wanted all these years. Absolutely yes. Let me know what games you're looking forward to in the comments below, or better yet, leave suggestions about action movies from the 1980s that you feel would make good video games now. That's your lot for today. I'll be back next time with an episode of Gossip News, but more probably with an episode of The Big Slice. If you're of a mind and want to help us develop and get better and get new equipment, then you can support us on Patreon, and that pretty much ties up everything that I have to cover on this episode. So, until next time, thanks for watching.